All right, my friends, so today we're going to be talking about how to stay centered over that lead foot, what that means, and how you can apply it to your skating. Some context: I was on live through YouTube and someone mentioned they were having trouble going up banks and even doing tricks like nollie 50s because they would find themselves doing the trick and the board will leave them and they would go forward. Because instead of staying centered over that lead foot, as a regular skater it's the left one, because you're going for the trick and leaning prematurely forward before you even pop, you kind of end up tripping yourself. So the same thing can happen when you're doing something like a nollie 50 on the ledge, where you go for the nollie and instead of jumping straight up directly over that lead foot, you start to jump prematurely and you end up going diagonal, right? So you go, you jump, and you pretty much jump towards the obstacle instead of jumping straight up. So jumping straight up will look down, right? Whereas if you go for the nollie and lean prematurely forward, that's what's gonna end up happening. Similarly, if you were to jump diagonally or trip yourself over the front leg when I'm doing something like a nollie flip, this is how it would look. We're pretty much stopping ourselves from getting a good snap and even flicking because we're just throwing ourselves into the bank instead of just jumping straight over that pop foot, so that we can land, you know, centered over that lead foot, which then becomes, on the way down, my right one. So my lead foot is the left. Once I pop and I'm landing, my weight is transferring over the right side. This gets a bit tricky when you're doing tricks like, you know, let's say a 50-50 back 180 out, right? Okay, that trick gets a little tricky because when we 180 out, instead of centering ourselves over the lead foot when we land, we become okay with doing the backside 50-50, being centered, but as soon as we go out of the bit, we stay on this foot, which is not the lead foot. This one is the lead foot. So to make sure you're centering yourself over the lead foot or prioritizing that, you want to make sure you understand what is the lead foot when you're doing your tricks. So for example, when you're doing 50-50 back 180 out, the lead foot before you pop is the left. When you're on the trick is the left, and as you pop out, the lead foot changes to the right for a regular skater. You have to adjust it to your stance. The way that's going to be a bit more optimal when you're doing this trick is to make sure you're landing centered over that lead foot, which is my right. So you're going to see the example where I open myself up as I'm landing it so I can center myself over that lead foot. There we go. Now let's go to the quarter pipe so I can explain how that looks like when you're switching stance from regular to fakie, from nollie to fakie and stuff like that. So as I drop down, my lead foot becomes the left. As I go back, fakie or switch, right, left, right. What will help you stay centered over that lead foot is making sure you're opening up to the direction you're going. So as you can see, from switch to regular, I'm not just going back and forth, I'm also rotating the top half of my body. So a lot of us make the mistake of doing this. We're gonna stay facing one direction and we kind of have our back towards the obstacle. What I'm suggesting you start applying to your skating is making sure you're opening up to the direction you're going, because it's going to allow you to stay centered over that lead foot, whichever direction you're going. So check it out. And it's not going to feel so comfortable, so I encourage you to take it step by step and maybe even just start by turning your head all the way, right? And as you build that comfort, you just kind of externally rotate the shoulder, the elbows, the wrist, your hip, the knee, and you just kind of go down that chain. This will slowly give you that ability to adapt to opening up to whatever direction you're going. So we covered how you would need to be centered over that lead foot with just skating a bank, very briefly, how it would be when you're doing a ledge trick. You end up leaving you know, switch or fakie, and also briefly covering, you know, how that looks like when you're going from regular to fake. This is a good entry level to help you understand how you should be centered over that lead foot when you do tricks like big spin, right? Because you start on one stance and end on the other, and many times as we learn these tricks, we think about landing in fakie stance where we still are closed off to the direction we're going, but we want to build that ability to allow our body to land in a switch stance instead of a fakie stance, which looks something like this. I'm opened up to the direction I'm going instead of closing myself off like I did the first time. Now, if we're skating something like doing a big spin here, that becomes a bit more helpful when I close myself off to the obstacle, because I'm no longer going up. I'm so opened up, opened up. So basically that is helpful when I'm skating this, because I'm no longer going the direction I started at first, but I come back down because of the obstacle itself. Similarly, if I was skating the back. Now, if I go to skating just this bank, right, and I do a big spin over this, it'll be helpful for me to land in a way where I'm opened up to the direction I'm going instead of being closed off like you saw on the first big spin example. So here's one where it's not preferred. My back is facing the direction I was going. Now it's going to be the other way, the preferred way, where we open up towards the direction we're going. I want to emphasize, it's not that it's impossible to land it where your back is facing the direction you're going. It's just less optimal, because then when you try to, you know, let's say do a trick after, you become very limited and can only try tricks that you're comfortable where you're in a backwards stance, as opposed to skating it where you have that availability, where you can choose to land here, or you can choose to land opened up, and then maybe you want to do like a switch frontside flip a bit more comfortably. So it's about having access to that range of motion, and this is why I mentioned how it's so much more optimal to build on top of this ability. And so just because we know we have to skate like this, it doesn't mean this is where we start. We have to get super comfortable doing things like going back and forth and opening up our body where it feels like it's second nature. If it doesn't feel like it's second nature, I encourage you to start skating these obstacles and just rolling around. Maybe this isn't your warm-up, maybe this isn't your cool down, but just doing things like making sure you open up when you're rolling through the obstacles, fakie or switch, is super beneficial and will slowly get you to the place where you can have that range of motion. So this is how it would look. But once you start feeling comfortable with that, you can begin to incorporate some pop, because if you skip to just trying to get pop, you're gonna likely resort to that habit you've built of just having your back facing the obstacle you're going. So once you feel comfortable with that, you've practiced that can take days, weeks, months. It really depends on your ability, how consistently you skate, or your experience with skateboarding. But once you feel comfortable with that, you'll begin to incorporate that pop like this. Now the switch. Now, those are just examples of what it looks like to progress it on the bank. But a similar application applies when you're doing, let's say, kick turns, switch backside or switch frontside. So for example, you're gonna see me kick turn where I am stuck in this habit of staying closed off, and then you're going to see the complete opposite where I'm opened up to the direction I'm going as I do my kick turns. So now let's do closed off backside and frontside kick turns. See my shoulder come forward first. Now look at the front side. You can see my legs come forward first and my back closed off to the direction I'm going. Now it's going to be the complete opposite, which is what I'm suggesting, to open up as you're kick turning. So here. you see my leg or foot come forward first with the backside. And on that one, you see the top half of my body opening up before I lift my board, right? Because I'm turned, as I lift my board, it just follows everything. So that's another example when we're skating or, you know, kick turning on ramps. But that also applies when we're doing tricks like a backside 180, switch, or regular. For a regular 180, you can see that when I do it, I open up the top half before I go for the ollie. And I am also opened up when I land. Now, with switch 180s, a lot of us have the tendency to stay backwards because that's the posture we're comfortable with, and we end up doing switch 180s like this, which can still be done, but becomes so restricting when you try to progress to other tricks. So what I'm recommending when it comes down to doing switch 180s, as an example, is making sure you're opening up just like you would open up in your regular steps. It should look something like this. And not because it's the best way to do it, mostly because it allows you to have a range of motion that you can choose from depending on what trick you want to try. And it doesn't keep you in a limited state when you're skateboarding. The biggest takeaway I want you to have with this video is to slowly begin to make adaptations in a way where it's going to allow you to stay opened up to the direction you're going. It doesn't mean to try your switch tricks you already have and open them up. What I'm suggesting is you start from a position that you would have likely started if you just started skateboarding. So that means understanding how to push, switch, where you're opened up to the direction you're going. That means being able to do kick turns with the top opened up to the direction you're going. Because let's say you already have a switch frontside flip, but where you're closed off, which is what I had, it's going to be so much more frustrating to do that with a posture where you're opened up if you're already very adapted to this closed off position. So you want to rewire your brain and your ability by making sure you have a front 180, right? Where you're opened up to the direction you're going. So what we don't want to do is this. Close off to the direction I'm going. So we don't want to do that. Instead, we want to slowly wire in the ability to do this. And it may not start with switch 180s. It may start with just turning the front side, right? Opening up, turning, understanding where your feet have to be placed to allow that adaptation to happen, and so that you have that range of motion when you're progressing that ability. Okay, so here I'm going to show you examples of what it means to open up with all four manuals. So nose mani, regular mani, switch mani, and fakie mani. The first way is going to be the example of what most skaters resort to, and the second way is showing you the example where it's more optimal and it gives you more range of motion and ability moving forward when you want to try out different tricks. So on that one, I'm not necessarily closed off, but I'm very parallel to the board, where instead of allowing myself to open up to the direction I'm going. Again, just because you do them this way, it doesn't mean it's going to be harder to land them. It's just going to be very limited and have you restricted with your mechanics. Now, this is the way where it's going to have you accessing, or it's going to give you the opportunity to access tricks that you may have otherwise closed yourself off to because things feel very restrictive. This is going to open up that mental thought, that creative thought, and also your physical ability. So, and give you that confidence, both mentally and physically. You can see how my chest is more exposed, opened up to the direction I'm going. Not the best example, but it definitely is better than the first one where I just close myself off and I'm parallel over the board. Again, this adaptation doesn't happen right away. It happens as you slowly get comfortable doing flat ground switch ollies, kick turns, pushing, because your mechanics are wired in a way where you naturally want to open up, or naturally prefer to open up instead of closing yourself off, because this opening up becomes the new normal, what your body feels safe with, and you don't have to get into a battle to really force yourself to be here, and that is not what we want to do. We want to slowly adapt to have that ability, that range of motion, as I've been referring to it as. Okay. You have the examples of what it looks like to be closed off to the direction you're going and what it looks like to be opened up. Again, not the best examples, but it gives you an idea of what we're aiming for, what the North Star is, so to speak, and give you a goal to reach and make sure that you're working on the process to get to that goal. So your goal might look like a switch ollie with comfort, and the process might be starting to push a bit more opened up, starting to kick turn, being able to rotate your body as you skate quarter pipes or go down banks, switch or fakie. So make sure you're focusing more on the process instead of trying to force the goal. You want to be able to feel out the adaptations as you go through that process instead of forcing your way to that goal. Start small, you know, be content with the 1% wins, and it's important to not have expectations of how long something's going to take, because the process cannot be rushed. You can only speed up the process by giving it your own time through reps, iteration, reiteration. And like I said, this is not all you need to know about opening up. There's so many other factors to consider. It gives you a good intro to what it means. I'm gonna do kickflip and switch flip with the intention to open up to the direction I'm going with a switch flip. You guys can see what it means to open up to the direction I'm going as I flick, and when I'm landing, as I go back to my regular stance. You can see with the kickflip that I open up when I'm going fake or going switch. So it's so much harder. What I will need to do is get way more comfortable just doing switch ollies back to regular. Instead of this. So one of them has my back facing the direction I'm going, whereas the other is me opening up to the direction I'm going. So we're gonna give the best switch flip attempt. So it's super easy to go back to regular, but when I'm flicking, I want to be opened up. The attempt of this switch flip is a great example of why it's important to engage on that lead foot. So on this switch flip attempt, I'm making sure that I'm engaged over this right foot, centered over this right foot, right? So like I've already mentioned, you might not start where your goal is. You want to start making sure you understand how to fill out that process. So filling out that process to do a switch flip on this, for example, would be knowing how to kick turn so much more comfortably on this while I open up, understanding how I do switch ollies. So it's super important that when you're doing tricks like rock to fakie, you don't gravitate towards having your back facing the direction you're going, and instead making sure you're giving yourself that intention to open up as we've been talking about throughout this video. As we've been talking about throughout this video. We're gonna have to edit so much. As you start to apply these concepts a bit more efficiently, things will start to feel so much more attainable instead of something that's out of reach. right? And so we want things to feel good, not just to look good. And so if you're interested in that, make sure you comment your questions, make sure you subscribe, hop on the lives, or check out the memberships. Subscribe if you haven't already and you found this video helpful. We talk about progressing and some, according to everyone, some nuanced topics that are going to help you progress in your skateboarding. It's not so much focused on just foot placement. It's more of improving your ability by thinking about other factors like posture, mental, physical ability, other factors that most tutorials kind of forget about or don't include, you know, in the context when we're trying to learn how to skateboard. And if you're someone who's interested in lessons or coaching, you can hit me up at profe.carlos on Instagram. We can talk about what that would look like, you know, whether it's something that was going to go ongoing or it's just a one session where you want some clarity to how your approach should be. Instagram is where that happens. If you want something a bit more informal, you can check out the membership options on this YouTube channel. I have 3 levels and each of them have their perks, so you might want to check that out. Hope you guys have a great day.